Welcome, and I call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Good evening, and welcome to our second Customer Advisory Committee meeting. Great things happen when people come together, and I'm happy to see all of you here again tonight. Please join in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, happy to be with you again tonight, and let's look at the agenda to get a sense of what we're doing. So we'll have an opportunity for, after we go around and just do some very brief intros, we'll have an opportunity for some public comment for any of the public that would like to speak. We'll also have an opportunity at the end for some public comment, so just so that you know there'll be two places. And I know that Jenna will be working with you to approve the minutes of your meeting number 1. And then we'll move into the meat of our evening. So the water demand forecast, and we'll find out what does that mean. The district pipeline asset inventory. So I know you'll be eager to see the results of what Missy and her team and the consultants have been doing to look at all of the various assets. And then also looking at main replacement benchmarking. So what are the benchmarks that are used when a district looks at replacing their water mains? So that's really the key elements that we'll be looking at tonight. So let's have a chance to go around and just reacquaint ourselves, but we're going to do that very quickly. We're also going to use this as an opportunity to test the mics. So, and the reason being, or actually, it's to test ourselves. So, as you know, this is being recorded, and also you'll be on the YouTube, correct, Mr. Strauss? And so we want to make sure that whenever you speak, you are speaking clearly into a mic. So you have more mics at your tables than you had before. And so what we'd like you to do is we'll go around the room and just introduce yourself. And if you're a CAC member, just say whether you're an individual residential representative or whether you're an institutional representative. So your name, and then that way you can test the mics. Now, if you look at the mics, there's a light. And when you push it and turn it on, the light is on. So when you speak, all you have to do is push the light, pull it toward yourself, speak, and then you'll pass it to the next person. But once we leave your table, then you can just turn the mic off. So this will be the opportunity to make sure that we can all be heard. So how about if we start with Miss Ian?
Hi, I'm Missy Pieri. I'm the engineering manager for Citrus Heights Water District.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Castrita. I'm with Citrus Heights Water District. One additional note with regards to the microphones. They tend to work best within about a foot of your speaking, where you're speaking, so just, you might keep that in mind.
Hi, I'm Jenna Moser. I'm a residential member.
Hi, I'm Amy Pfaff, and I'm an individual residential member.
Hello, I'm Rick Moses, and I'm an individual resident member.
I'm Kimberly Berg, and I'm a commercial member, owner of Citrus Heights Car Wash.
Wes Irvin, representing the Citrus Heights Chamber of Commerce and commercial users.
Doug McTaggart, I'm a residential member.
And be sure to pull it and speak up loudly so that it can be heard on the video also.
David Page, residential member. I'm Mike Nishimura, commercial member. Hey, I'm a commercial member representing Sunrise Marketplace.
Great, thank you.
Hers isn't working either. Patty Catalano, and I'm a residential member. Hi, Catherine Cooley with the City of Citrus Heights. I'm the assistant to the city manager.
Okay, Michael Goebel, I'm a CAC member, residential.
Thank you, Michael.
David Wheaton, residential member.
And if you would, try your mics to see if they're working, and then that way we'll know.
Rick Moore, residential member.
Okay, so let's try the table mic first.
Suzanne Guthrie.
Residential?
Not sure that was working, so.
It didn't look like it was, but I can speak loudly.
No, we need it on this so that it will appear. So thanks.
No, via institutional.
And if we go back to Suzanne, that would be great.
Suzanne Guthrie, residential.
Thank you.
Ray Reilly, board member.
That's a mystery, you know.
Rex Meir, Citrus Heights Water District.
David Gordon, Citrus Heights Water District. And good evening, I'm Hillary Strauss, General Manager with Citrus Heights Water.
And I'm, pardon me, Roger Cohn with Harrison Associates.
Susan Sohel, Administrative Services Manager, Citrus Heights Water.
Tamar Dawson, Assistant Engineer, Citrus Heights Water District.
Paul Dietrich, Project Manager.
Madeline Henry, Management Services Specialist and Deputy Board Clerk with Citrus Heights Water.
Andrew McDonald.
You got to get closer.
Andrew McDonald with Harrison Associates.
Hi, Eric Vaughn with Harrison Associates.
Okay, so we'll address any of the mics that weren't working, but let's make sure if whenever you do have comments that we do it in the mic, and that would be extremely helpful. So thank you very much. So let's turn it back over to Jenna for
Thank you, Laura.
any public comment.
At this time, we'll open the public comment period for items that don't appear on the agenda. Members of the public may make a comment up to 3 minutes on any item that does not appear on the agenda. Is there any public that would like to make any comments?
Hello. Hi, my name is Mike Potter. I own a business here in Citrus Heights, a wellness center. And I'm not speaking to anything on the agenda. Though I do want some information on the housing that's going in on Greenback and Sunrise and Fair Oaks. How we're going to do the water mains on that, number one. Also, the chemicals that we're putting in our water. How do I get a listing of that so when I put a water filter system in my client's house, I can tell them what's in the water and what's being taken out of the water with the filter? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to make a comment at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes. The meeting minutes include a Q&A to some questions that were asked at the last meeting, and staff has tried to provide a thorough answer in those. Minutes will continue to be provided in this same fashion. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Thank you, Ms. Guthrie.
And would you be sure? There's a mic behind you. Thank you.
I so move.
Thank you, Ms. Guthrie. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the briefing on the water demand forecast, a district pipeline asset inventory, and main replacement benchmarking. Ms. Pierre will provide the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Holler if you can't hear me.
And louder.
Hard to.
Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Missy Pieri, and I'm the engineering manager for Citrus Heights Water District. I'd like to give an overview of where we are and where we plan to go with the Project 2030 Water Main Replacement Project. Okay. All right, so on your table in front of you, you have the schedule. That might be good to look at. I'd just like to give an overview of the project with the key technical elements along with the schedule. We'll be referring back to this over the future CAC meetings, so I'm sure you're already familiar with it. So the orange rectangles is where we are today. So I just wanted to give an overview. Let me grab mine so I can actually read it. So within the orange rectangle up above, under the technical elements, we have completed the document scanning. And as far as the asset inventory, we're nearly complete with that, which we will be giving you an overview of that tonight in our presentation. And then another element that we have worked on is the draft of the water demand forecast. So you've all received the technical memorandum number 1. which provides an overview of the district's existing water demands and the projected future water demands. So Harris and Associates will give a summary of technical memo number 1 tonight in their presentation. So if you have any questions, we will also be asking for CAC input and feedback on tech memo number 1 after the presentation. So in addition, Harris and Associates will also go over the water main replacement basics and do an introduction on utility benchmarking. So all of these items we will be discussing tonight are building blocks for the next steps of the Project 2030 Water Main Replacement Project. See if So as shown, after tonight, the next steps of the study, which are highlighted in blue, we will be using this data that we present tonight to help us determine which water mains need to be replaced and in what order. We'll be prioritizing them. We'll also be looking at cost estimates. We'll be developing those for the water main replacements. So these items will be presented to you at Workshop 3, which is scheduled on December 11th. So here's just another graphic that summarizes the Project 2030 scope. The rectangles in gray are items that we've completed or they're nearly complete, and then the items in blue are items we'll be working on in the future, technical memos and CAC meetings. And then along the right, we have our public engagement that we'll be working with you all on. So with that, we'd like to start off with Harris and Associates going over the water demand forecast.
Great. Thanks, Missy. Okay. So I'll be going over technical memorandum 1 and how projected changes in water usage will affect the way the district replaces and sizes water mains. So in addition to the factors that we're looking at in the condition assessment, how old the pipes are, what they're made of, things like that, another big factor that matters when you're trying to determine the condition of pipes is how much water is going through them. And then if we're looking into the future, we want to know over time, how's that water use going to change, and how's that going to influence the aging of the pipes?
How is it going to influence what?
How is it going to influence the aging of the pipes?
Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, if you can't hear me, please speak up.
That's okay.
Thank you.
How many years have run out of jackhammer?
Good. Okay, so just once again, just to give you an idea of how this study has been a building block for the whole of the project, we've got the two sort of things that are feeding into the water main assessment, right? On one hand, you have the asset inventory, which we'll be talking about later in the meeting. And right now, we'll be talking about the demand forecast. So these two blocks go in and give us sort of the inputs that we need to build the water main assessment. And with those building blocks and with the assessment, we can then look at how we prioritize repairs, projects, what the funding requirements are, and all this. So to start off, this is where you guys looked at a slide similar to this in the last meeting. And this slide gives us, when you want to start a forecast by looking at the past. And so, from 1970 to roughly around 2000, there was a big increase in water usage in Citrus Heights. The district grew, population growth primarily drove this. And then in 2000 to 2015, there was a very precipitous drop in water use. Several factors were responsible, things like metering, several efficiency gains, water conservation measures, and then, of course, the drought. So the question then is, what's next? And in the slide you saw in the last meeting, there was this question mark. Over the next 20 or 30 years, is water use going to increase? Is it going to stay the same? Is it going to decline? I'm sure you were all on the edge of your seats waiting to find out what was going to happen. You have the answer in front of you now in the technical memo. So I'm going to go over sort of the recipe, how we put that together, some of the assumptions we made. Yeah. Okay, so creating a baseline. This gives you an idea of the baseline that we created to build the forecast. So where do things stand right now in terms of water usage? So we set the baseline at 2017, and what we did was we organized the district for different types of land uses. Now these are pretty common categories. You'll see these in general planning. You'll see these in urban water management plans. The reason that we organize a district in this way is because the water use habits and patterns are different for these different types of users. Rate structures, all sort of organized in this way. So it makes sense to look at a district in these groups. We used a digital mapping technique. If we're trying to create an asset management plan that's where water is going to different parts of the city, we want to understand for the different parts of the city where these users are, and that sort of dictates what's going on and how much water is going to the pipes underneath them. So we used US Census data to figure out, so US Census data and also parcel data, so this is digital mapping information, to determine sort of where all these different types of users are across the district. And as you can see, just by looking, single-family users are sort of the largest group in Citrus Heights. There's a pretty large subset of multifamily homes, and then some commercial, industrial, public. You can see that even though public space doesn't necessarily take up a lot of land in the district, a lot of water is used in the public land. Yeah. Okay, so from that baseline, then we want to look at trends. One of the big things we want to look at, so in Citrus Heights, the district is almost completely built up, right? There's not a lot of vacant land, only a small percentage of vacant land. So one of the biggest factors then we want to look at when we want to see how much water use is going to change is population growth. But because the district is almost fully built out, population growth estimates are pretty low. So we took our estimate from the Sacramento Area Council of Governments estimate, which was 0.5%, so pretty conservative, and we applied that over the time horizon. Another thing I should point out, an assumption we made, was we assumed that the district would not grow in size. Okay, one of the other big assumptions is that water conservation is going to be driven by a couple of new rules, a couple new laws that came into being last year. And here to talk about this will be Chris.
Thank you, Eric. So, as Eric mentioned, new state law was recently passed on May 31st. Governor Brown signed into law SB 606 and AB 1668. These two laws put in place a water use requirement for water suppliers such as Citrus Heights Water District. Those requirements are currently to be developed by the State Water Resources Control Board, a state agency that oversees water districts such as ourselves, and it is expected to go into effect in full by the year 2022. Now, these requirements are placed on us, the district, at the district level, and there really are 4 requirements that we expect. 2 of these have been put in place. Residential indoor water use, there is a requirement that is currently in place and identified, which we are expecting to slowly have to roll out and implement in order to meet state law. In addition, water loss requirements are currently in place, and we have been required to meet them as a district for the past few years. Beyond that, there are expected commercial and institutional use requirements that the State Water Resources Control Board is projected to put in place based upon the specifics of AB 1668 SB 606. In addition, there is the expectation that there will be an outdoor use requirement as well. Unfortunately, we don't know the specifics of those two regulations because nothing as of yet has been created by the State Water Resources Control Board. So I do really want to stress that residential indoor water use will be measured at the district level. They're not going to be specifically going after you for failing to meet that water use requirements. They would be looking at us as a whole, and that means really focusing on a specific measure, gallons per capita per day. And this is really an average of use across our entire population. So going into that a little bit further, my associate Rex Muir will be providing further information with regards to what that means for our customers.
Thank you, Chris, and good evening. So the standard for the indoor water use that was developed by 2022 is 55 gallons per day per resident, and that is, I want to stress, indoor water use. And it will ratchet down to 50 gallons per capita per day by 2030. And we do plan on measuring that at the district level. We are not going to measure everybody's indoor water use right now. We simply do not have the means in place right now. And we are exploring, the district's exploring available options to meet our targets. We're working with the customers. We have residential outreach programs, rebates, water efficiency reviews. So we do have programs in place and doing public outreach to help the customers reduce their water use and be as efficient as possible. And of course, we're always on the lookout for these regulations coming through. We are the skeptics of being prescribed what to do by the state. So we will be watching for that and taking action when we feel necessary, not just as a district, but probably as a region. So as you see, based on what Chris's comments were and what I mentioned about the indoor water use requirements, legislation is a major factor in in determining water demand. So with that being said, I will turn it back over to Eric.
Thank you. Okay, so we have these competing forces at work, right? We've got population, which is growing at a conservative clip. We don't expect the borders of the district to grow over the forecast period. And in addition to that, we have two new laws that are expecting to, they're looking for some measure of conservation to occur over the planning period. So when we did the baseline, we looked to see sort of where things were right now per capita. And according to the data, this is what we found. We found on average, right, of course, this doesn't represent any one household. This is, some of the households were using more, some were using less. But on average, we found that single-family homes were using approximately 140 gallons per capita per day, residential, okay? And that's a combination of indoor and outdoor use. And then for the multifamily homes, on average, we found that it was right around 70. So if you look at these new requirements, you see that, 55 and then down to 50. We could see that multifamily probably pretty close. So when we were thinking about, well, what can we expect to see in terms of, percentage reductions over the planning period in terms of, per capita water use, we thought that it would probably not be a whole lot of change in the multifamily homes. Whereas with the single family homes, there would there's probably more outdoor use. It's probably one of the differences between the two. So we would expect to see more. So what we did was we tried to apply a conservative conservation, like a percentage reduction over time. And what we settled on was 1% per year. So 10% per decade over the planning horizon, so over 30 years. And when you do that, the single-family average goes from 140 to 100, and then because we're applying a smaller percentage to the multifamily homes, 5%, it changes, from about 70 to about 48, 46, something like that. Okay, so once you've said that, then you sort of put it all together. And what you find is, that there's an overall reduction in total water use in the district. I talked earlier about the 0.5% population growth. Well, how do you apply that, right? Some of it's going to be growth in single-family homes. Some of it's going to be growth in multifamily homes. Well, we know that the district is mostly built out, so the only really single-family growth potential is for vacant plots, right? And we also know that there's not a lot. So we applied only a small percent of the total population growth to single-family homes. We also looked towards the Citrus Heights General Plan for guidance in this. And the general plan was essentially looking for some potential for conversion of commercial areas to mixed use, which is going to be more on the multifamily sort of type. So we assumed that there would be some redevelopment over the planning horizon of commercial to mixed use, which would increase the amount of multifamily homes available in the district. So when we put those assumptions in and projected forward, also putting in the change in the conservation measures, right? The reduction in per capita water use. We saw that there was sort of a slight, decrease overall in single-family water use, a slight increase in multifamily water use. And then we didn't make any assumptions about any changes in commercial, industrial, or public. And we know that the laws will have something to say on this matter in the future. We just don't know what they are right now. So we assume no change in per unit use for commercial and industrial. Okay, so just to make this point clear, you've got these two competing forces, right? You've got population growth, which increases water use, and you've got conservation measures, which decrease water use. And you can see that water efficiency is sort of winning the tug of war in this case. And that's why we're anticipating some measure of reduction overall in water use. And you'll recall from the historical plot that showed, in the 70s to 2000 an increase and then a pretty drastic reduction from 2000 to 2015. Well, we believe that the level of change is going to not continue at that rate. We think it's going to level off pretty clearly. Okay. But of course, there's no way to know exactly what 30 years is going to be like, right? So there's some sensitivity. The truth is going to lie here somewhere. And we've made the best assumptions we can based on the data that we have and the information that we have. Conservation measures could be higher than we anticipate. Maybe there will be a 12% reduction. Could be lower. Maybe it'll be 5%. So, thinking about sort of the boundaries of where the truth lies in there, we believe that a reasonable assumption will be that over the next 30 years or so, the demand will roughly be between 7.8 and 9.5 million gallons per day. That leaves me to Roger Cohen.
Thank you, Eric. So I'm kind of the last of the long line of speakers here to kind of bring to a close this demand forecast presentation. And really kind of what my role here is to just sort of briefly explain what are we going to do with this data. And I think Eric alluded to it in the beginning. Part of the question is looking at, how much water do we anticipate is going to be flowing through the pipes in the future. And so that's where the demand forecast comes in. And so since I kind of like geeking out on this sort of stuff here, let me kind of quickly explain what this is. So this is a map of the city, of the district's water distribution system. And what it's showing is the primary water mains. It's not showing every residential pipe because it would be a sea of blue essentially here. But these are the main pipes, almost like arteries, you know, flowing through the body. And you'll notice, you'll see a lot of blue and a lot of magenta. And down in the lower right-hand corner, you can see, and I don't know how well you can see it there, but are various velocities. And I won't go into all of that, but it's safe to say that this is based on 2017 demand data where, you know, which is roughly half of what it was in 1999-2000. If we were to show a model output from 2000, you would see mostly orange colored pipes, and that's because that's what the system was designed to flow at. It was designed to flow at a higher velocity. But through conservation and through a lot of the trends here that have happened, a lot of those flow velocities have come down. And what that means is there's actually a lot of capacity in those pipes, or another way to look at it, there's the opportunity to look when we're doing the main replacement work and analysis to look at possibly putting in smaller pipes. And that's one of the things that we're going to be looking at. But another thing, I guess, what I wanted to stress, certainly as we had shown, the demand forecast is an important building block that's going to feed into the main replacement. But it's not the only building block. And so that's why, you know, the analysis, the slide previous to that showed the range in the possible forecast was really meant to show sort of the sensitivity analysis. What might the future look like for that? But when we're doing the analysis, there's going to be other factors that we're going to take into account when we look at that. And so the demand forecast is an important factor, but it's not the only factor. And so that's why we will be taking that information, but also looking at other information here to kind of come up with a course. And that's really kind of what two other key takeaways for this, I would say, is we want to set off on a course, on an initial course that we think represents a path that is kind of the most likely to the direction that we think history is going to, or I should say the future is going to take us. But we also want to have a plan that is going to have enough flexibility in it so that if we do see changes in demographics and population growth and regulations, that the plan has flexibility built into it so that we can make that sort of adjustment in the funding and the capital improvement planning and all of that down the road. So, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that with the benchmarking as well. But I just wanted to leave you with that thought that we're going to be using tools that the district has here to take that demand forecast in, look at that, look at other factors, and then that will build into the main replacement work. So with that, I think that brings our session to an end.
So I don't know about you, but I don't have the expertise that Harris has with regard to water mains and the district has. And so when I first heard about a water demand forecast, I said, well, what is that? Help me understand what that means. And so we put it right on the agenda. How projected changes in water usage will affect the way the district replaces and sizes water mains, which Roger just talked about, some of the elements that you saw on the map. So you received a technical memorandum from Chris. It was several pages long, and it really was much more detailed, but this really was a summary of what's in that technical memorandum. But again, this is one of the key building blocks to the work that the district and that you will be continuing to do. So what we want to do now is stop and have an opportunity for you to just talk and say, okay, what did we hear? And what questions do we have? What do we want to know more about? So that you'll feel like, okay, I get it. I read the technical memorandum, I've seen this summary, and so we're guessing you probably have questions. So our thought is for you to get into some groups of 3, and 2 or 3. So right here we have 2 at this table. So how about if we could have Richard join? So that'll be a group of 3, and this would be a group of 3. How about here's another group of 3, and we can do a group of 3 here, and we can do a group of 4. Ray, if you would come down with this group. And so what we're asking is that you talk to each other about what you heard, just basically what did you hear and what did you read in the technical memo? And then what questions do you have that you would like to know more about? So that you feel like you have a really strong foundation in this particular aspect, the water demand forecast. You'll notice at your tables you have some stickies and some pens. So for each question you come up with, would you write that question, each question individually, on one of these sticky notes, which we'll then put up. And you'll see that I believe these all stick at the top, so it's better to write them like this, and that'll be easy to read. If you use this pen and you use the sharper point, you'll be able to write. And so let's take 8 minutes and have you talk in your group. What did you hear? What questions do you have? Put each question individually on one of the sticky notes, and then we'll gather those and then get answers to your questions. Thank you. Okay, it looks like you're all ready. And so what we'd like to do is go around and just hear, we'd like to hear the questions from each group. And then we'll take a break, and during that break, then your consultants will be, and your staff will be able to look at the questions, and then we'll come back after the break and answer them. So how about let's start over with this group. Suzanne, did you want to read the questions? Or Ray?
What? You want me to read my questions?
Into the mic.
Into the mic. All right. Into the mic.
All right, perfect.
It's unfair for me to ask these questions because I've already thought about this stuff before we came in. However, when you had your chart that shows the consumption of the apartment dwellers and the residential single-family homes, what time of year are you measuring water use, or is that the total use over the year? Is that the water use from November to March, or is that the water use from May to September?
And so we won't answer them right now. We'll gather all the questions, then we'll answer them after the break.
And then the requirement, what is the minimum use of water likely to be? What's the baseline that the state is going to set for residential and indoor and outdoor consumption?
Okay, great. Thank you. How about next group?
We have several questions, but I'll only ask 2.
And it's fine if you have more, so we'll take them.
Let's see, is there any possibility the district service area expands or decreases? And what are the impacts to your analysis? And then the second question, if district exceeds mandated water consumption, what are the penalties and how are they enforced?
Okay. And did you have other questions that you'd like us to come back to? And you can put those, it would be fine.
We're good.
You're good. Okay, great, thanks. Let's go to our next group.
I wanted to know, how does the district regulate water pressure? Is it through the size of the pipes? Is it through how much water they pump through the system? Because some people have low water pressure, we have high water pressure. How do they regulate that?
Okay. Any other questions from your group? Okay, great, thank you. How about this group?
Our question has to do with the level of confidence in the demand projections. You have a demand forecast, you have a higher efficiency and a lower efficiency reduction figured in. And I think there was a mention of a sensitivity analysis earlier, but we'd like to know more about the level of confidence in this demand forecast.
Okay, great, thank you.
We can put them down.
So,
If you would say that into the mic, it would help.
We have a couple of other questions. We thought we were just limited to one, so we can write those down or ask them later.
Okay, that would be great.
thank you.
Let's go to this group.
We had questions about maybe providing some examples of the differences in diameter of pipe and how that may be better for doing repairs or worse for doing repairs. Maybe some examples of pipe size and how that affects, if it's available for trenchless technology. We also had a question about enforcement of the minimums and maximums, if there's going to be some enforcement of the type of fixtures that you use in your house or yard, and if it's possible for a residential water reuse program to be developed, maybe to streamline permitting for some recycled water projects.
Okay, great, thank you. And so for those that have a few other questions, would you just quickly jot those down on one of the sticky notes? And we're going to take a break. We'll take a 12-minute break, so just look at your clock and come back in 12 minutes. During that time, we'll get organized, but we'd love to gather any other questions at this point, too. So if you have some, please give them to me, and we'll come back in 12 minutes. All right, let's keep going. And we have your questions, and I just want to let you know, you'll hear answers now, but these are really just the first cut. So in the meeting summary, we'll take what you've heard here tonight and add any other technical information that would be helpful. So I'll turn it over to Hillary.
Okay. All right, thank you, Laura. I actually got the easy question, which is there any possibility that the district service area will expand or decrease, and what would be the impacts? The short answer is it is very unlikely that our service area will modify. You know, when our service area began back in 1920, it was more or less just agricultural land. There was room to grow. We grew from very small service area up to 12.7 square miles, but now we're completely surrounded by other water providers, and so it is highly unlikely that we will see any adjustment in our boundaries of any significant amount. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Roger.
Okay. Thank you. And so this is in no particular order. The first question came from Ray's group. What time of year are you measuring water use? And that goes to this graphic here in the projections. And the answer to that question is those numbers that we've been presenting are annual average. So it's averaged over a 12-month cycle. It's neither a summer month or winter month. It's an annual average. So that was the answer to that one. Okay, probably, hopefully I can do justice to this one. This one came from Doug and from Kimberly and from Wes. What is the level of confidence of the predicted demand forecast? Varies 17% high to low, which is correct. And so what I was trying to explain here before, and let me see if I can do a little better job of it this time, is that the numbers that we picked there in our minds represented what I call a sensitivity analysis. And so that is to say, what do we think is the reasonable high and low range for that? And so when we came up with those numbers, and so for the maximum water efficiency number, basically the 7.8 or the green line right there, you know, that represented what in our mind seemed like the maximum reasonable water efficiency change over the next 30 years. It just seems, and so, you know, for demand to keep going down, I think we thought that probably represents, you know, probably as low as it's likely to go. And then on the other end, the 9.5, as you can see from the orange graph, is more or less flat, and it's a slight decrease, and it's almost an offset between anticipated population growth, which we did feel just based on the 0.5% per year regional number here, which is a pretty standard number that a lot of agencies are using for population growth, at least on the utility planning side, that one we felt pretty confident in that. But the range there, I think, kind of almost represents, you know, very minimal water efficiency gains over the next 20, 30 years to probably what is the most aggressive water efficiency gain. So And as Laura said, I think we'll prepare, even a little bit more succinct response to that. Okay, the next one, and it doesn't say who it's from, but I'll just read it. Does the San Juan Water District have future or strategic goals that impact this water demand forecast? And so the response to that would be is when we did prepare our forecast and looked at some of the assumptions, both in terms of population growth as well as regulatory trends, we did look at the San Juan Water District's most recent urban water management plan, which was completed in 2015, same year that Citrus Heights and basically all water utilities had to do theirs. And so, we didn't use identical assumptions, but we did look to just make sure that we weren't way out on a totally different assumption path as the others, and feel that those assumptions, that those key assumptions here are consistent with their plans. Okay, next one. Can we get a water pipeline to get water from flood-prone areas to drought-stricken areas? And so, as many of you are probably aware, there is almost such a project that the state is looking at called WaterFix, and that's the old peripheral canal. But what we're talking about here, one of the things we wanted to emphasize, we aren't source constrained in this region here. I mean, there's in most years adequate supplies here to be able to get water conveyed, certainly within the district, to move around. So. I would say there are no plans, certainly at the district level, to look at any major pipelines or so. Okay, another question. Collect and filter rainwater to supplement water usage, and how can we do that? And again, sort of ties back into the, the district not really facing a pressing water supply issue here. However, the district certainly does recognize that, such conservation efforts, to offset, outdoor water irrigation and all that is certainly, on an individual homeowner basis is certainly, welcomed and encouraged or so, but it's not part of a major plan here to make a significant dent here in any sort of potable water demands. Okay, diameter of pipe and trenchless technologies. I think, Jenna, that came from your group here. And so it's a very interesting question. I mean, they've all been very interesting questions, but trenchless technology, and that's something actually that Harris actually does a lot of, but I would say there are basically two types of trenchless technologies. One is if you want to make the pipes bigger, and the other is if you want to make the pipes smaller. And so as the graphic here after this one had shown with the low pipe velocities, probably not looking at doing a lot of enlarging of pipes here. So probably really what we're talking about here, if we do look at alternative technologies, would be to look at going down in size. And so in terms of an optimal size, I would say in general there's more experience and probably a lot more construction experience on larger mains. So if you've got a 42-inch main, which is one of the main transmissions mains that the district has, and you wanted to downsize that by pulling a smaller pipe through it, that is more possible than if, let's say, you had a 12-inch pipe and you wanted to pull a 6-inch pipe through it. That becomes a little bit trickier, especially since down at the street-by-street level, you've got a number of water valves, you've got all sorts of service connections. Each of those service connections needs to be reconnected to each of the houses. And so I would say in general, trenchless technologies are probably generally going to favor more of the larger pipes than the smaller pipes. And Missy, there's the bottom of it for you. Okay, and I think this was the last one. This was also from Kimberly, Wes, and Doug. What is the relationship between line size, flow rates, and other factors in determining the line size to replace? Is it possible to just go to that next slide? If not, it's not a big deal, but there we go. So, so there is a relationship, and Certainly, and I think Missy has a question too about pressure and how pressure is regulated throughout the system, and I'll defer that question to her. But there is that relationship here. So, you know, as you might imagine, the less water, so that is flowing through the pipes. In other words, you know, the less water that people use throughout the system, the slower the water is going to be flowing through. That has certain advantages. Actually, it helps sort of raise the pressure a little bit because it's sort of an inverse relationship. As water flows more quickly, you actually lose energy and pressure, whereas if it's flowing slower, your pressure stays up a little bit higher. But at the same time, you know, when we are talking about the expense of replacing mains, we do want to look at and address, you know, what would be a suitable size pipe based on demand conditions today and into the future, not what was done 30 years ago. I mean, as we've seen from these demand graphs, demand, you know, on a per capita basis are much, much different than they are before. And then one other factor, and this is a phenomenon that's observed at many utilities, especially those that have had significant water conservation gains and water efficiency gains, is that the less water that is used, the longer the water stays in the pipes. And that probably makes sense to people here. So if imagine a tank on a hillside, and if it was 1 million gallons, if you used 1,000 gallons a day, the water is going to sit for a certain period of time. If you use only 500 gallons a day, it's actually going to be double the amount of time in the tank. Hopefully that makes sense. And that actually can get to a point where you can almost have infrastructure that's too big. And so that's also part of the hydraulic. That's where a hydraulic model like this becomes very useful, to be able to calculate and predict what that water age is, so that, you know, we don't have water that sits in the pipes and in tanks here too long. So hopefully that takes care of that. And with that, here you go, Chris.
Thank you, Roger. So Rex and I are going to field some of the questions with regards to the incoming state regulations. The first one, I believe, came from David, Michael, and Catherine's group. If district exceeds mandated water consumption, what are the penalties and how are they enforced? And unfortunately, we do have some information with regards to those specific penalties, but we don't have all of the information. You see, as you might recall from our presentation earlier, the State Water Resources Control Board still has to define all of the regulation. We know that by 2022, they will have completed that process of creating those regulations. Unfortunately, we do not yet know what those specific penalties are. However, we do know one, probably the most important factor, which is that they will be penalties assessed at the district level. They will not be assessed at the individual level, at the particular parcel level. They will be assessed, as we discussed previously, at the district level. But as present, we do not know what those specific penalties are, unfortunately. Second question, I believe this came from Ray, Noe, and Suzanne's group. What kind of goals, limitations will be coming for outdoor use? How will that be enforced? And once again, the State Water Resources Control Board has not yet defined those specific regulations. Again, we know when we expect those regulations to be coming. We expect them to be coming by the year 2022, but we do not know what those specific regulations will be. The law does lay out some basic parameters with regards to it, that we should expect an outdoor use regulation, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Rex, but it does kind of state what they cannot provide policy on, but it really doesn't state what that outdoor policy will be and what that regulation will look like, unfortunately. Finally, we have the question of what is the minimum use of water? Is there a baseline? And so I would assume, Ray, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be with regards to residential indoor water use, correct, sir? And so he said, is there a baseline? Are they going to go lower and lower? And there is a specific regulation currently in place, and so let me reiterate that. The standard for indoor residential water use would be 55 gallons per day, per person per day, beginning in 2022, and dropping incrementally to 50 gallons per person per day by 2030 for indoor water use. And so, again, these are kind of hard to define. We don't know specifically what indoor water use is like on an individual household basis, but we're going to do what we can to assist our customers, as we mentioned before, to implement this and do what we can to ensure that the district's interests are ultimately being upheld and that our customers' interests, most importantly, are being upheld. And Rex, I'm going to hand the mic off to you to discuss a little bit further some of the information that we have currently on this.
Thank you, Chris. If I could bring everyone's attention to the handout that's either on or under your placemat, and it's called State Water Efficiency Regulations. It's a great fact sheet that the district has put together to help the customer and the district understand the changes in the state law recently. It lays out some of the regulations and what it means for our customers and what the current regulations are. So those are also listed on the front. We offer some resources in there to deal with some of these regulations. And then on the back, we have a wonderful piece on frequently asked questions. These are probably some of the questions you may have in regards to these new regulations, and we try to lay it out for you in a simple way on this handout. So I urge you to take a look at it and read it.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Rex. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rex, but in addition, we can find this on the district's website, correct? chwd.org?
Yes, correct. So you can get on our website and view this along with our other water efficiency programs. So feel free to look at those too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I have two questions here. So one is, how does the district regulate water pressure? So we get our water from Folsom Lake, and Citrus Heights Water District sits lower than Folsom Lake, so the water flows by gravity. We have no pumps that we need. Everything's by gravity. So with that, in some areas, we do have higher water pressure. We do have some pressure regulators in two portions of our service area where the elevations are lower, and so that does regulate our water pressure, because you don't want your water pressure too high, because that is a problem with your fixtures. So anything over about 100 psi, we do have pressure regulators. So like Palm Avenue, we have a pressure regulating system there. And then by Rush Park also, we have a pressure regulator. But the rest of our district is not regulated, so we do have high pressures. So one of the things we are doing as part of the Project 2030 study is we're going to be doing a pressure analysis and maybe looking at reducing our pressures a little bit, maybe down from 100 psi to 60 to 80 psi. So we will be looking at that in this study. The next question is residential water reuse. Is that program, is that possible for Citrus Heights Water District? So a little background on reuse. You need wastewater to reuse, obviously. There's several wastewater treatment plants in the area that provide recycled water. So you have El Dorado Irrigation District up in El Dorado Hills. They have 2 wastewater treatment plants at least that produce recycled water, and it's great because their treatment plant is very close to their water users. So they transport that recycled water to Serrano Golf Course, to the newly built developments. You have City of Roseville. They have wastewater treatment plant very close to their points of view. So they send a lot of their recycled water to the golf courses and to various residential areas. For Citrus Heights Water District, As you know, the wastewater treatment plant is down in Elk Grove. So to get that water from Elk Grove up to Citrus Heights is a big expense because you need a pipeline. So that's a huge factor. Is there a way we could maybe tie in with the City of Roseville's recycled system? Potentially. That might be something we look at in the future, but at this point, it would be a big expense to the district. So with that, I think that is all of the questions.
Great, Missy, thank you. How about now that you've heard those answers, do you have any other questions? Anything else with regard to the technical memorandum that you received or the presentation or just anything else? Yes.
When you mentioned the frequently asked questions on the back here, it said that the Sacramento region's area uses about 66 gallons of water per person per day. And yet our slide up here said that we're using in Citrus Heights 140 gallons of water per day. Is there a reason or something as to why the difference between those two numbers?
Rich, I can answer that. The numbers that we were presenting there were annual average. So that includes indoor and outdoor. That includes summer, winter, all around. So those numbers were not limited to just indoor like the 66.
That was a great question. So other questions that you have? Yes, Mike. And if you'd pull the mic towards yourself. There is one coming to you.
Okay, I want to know how they're going to differentiate between indoor and outdoor use.
All right. Who would like to address that?
Well, let me give it a shot. So last week I actually just happened to attend a water data conference that was looking at kind of the future, both from regulations, but also how do you implement it. And it's interesting because, yeah, nobody knows what the answer is exactly how they're going to do that. But obviously, there would be different ways to monitor that. I mean, theoretically, you could put a separate meter or so on just a line that goes into your house versus that which goes to your irrigation system or something. But again, nobody's talking about that being a mandate only because that would be tremendously expensive for a utility to come back in and install new meters where there are already meters. But indoor use, again, there are different ways. I mean, you've got wastewater flows because generally what water comes into your home goes out through the sewer pipes. And so there are ways that, you can figure that out. The outdoor use is actually rather fascinating because the direction I think that the state and, technology folks are looking at is actually looking at individual water budgets which are based on individual, let's say, landscaping. And this almost sounds like it gets a bit intrusive, and many of you may think that it is, but if the state and or your local water district, if they know kind of what your landscaping both in the front yard and the backyard looks like, whether you've got all green grass, whether you've got all drought tolerant landscaping, whether you've got a big basketball court which takes no water, or you have a big swimming pool, each one of those types of landscaping has different, and the key there is evapotranspiration, how much water comes out of the ground and gets released into the air. And by that, then they infer, okay, well, if that's what the water's coming out of the ground, that's probably what you need to irrigate your plants to keep them alive. And so they can look at that and come up with ideas then for how much water, each individual landscape may take. That, of course, is a huge burden on water utilities because now your water utility then has to know what is going on at each house. And so, again, nobody's figured out exactly how that's going to look like, but I can tell you that is, those are some of the ideas that are being kicked around at the state level, is how to use technology and data to kind of really kind of hone in on individual water needs on an individual household basis.
How about other questions? Yes, Amy. Please speak into the mic.
So I have a question about the Living with California's current water efficiency regulations. Sorry, new glasses. Leaking water pipes need to be replaced in 5 working days or less if the problem is severe. Are they going to have some sort of program to help people who can't afford to make these repairs? So how are they going to force homeowners to pay for these leaking pipes that they can't afford to replace? They're just going to give them a higher water bill?
Would you like to answer that?
Okay, go for it, Rex.
Okay, so we are reasonable at the district, and we do take the customer's situation into consideration when we're out there. This will depend on the severity of the leak, the health and safety conditions that it's affecting. Do we have a low-income program to help with the fixing of the pipes? At this time, there's not anything available. But I can tell you that we will work with the customer to help ensure that this gets addressed at some point, so that it doesn't adversely affect also, their water use. So we don't have a specific program at this time. Again, this is a new reg, so we're gonna work our way through this with our customers. Thank you.
David, and then Suzanne.
I was just thinking out loud, when you were going through some of this, how it might impact businesses or businesses that rely on a lot of water, how it might impact streetscapes or parks, green spaces and things like that. Are those the outside uses? How are those being considered with all these regulations? Is there going to be a baseline, and when is that baseline set, or is that yet to be determined?
The short answer is a lot of that still has yet to be determined as these new regulations are being formulated, and as we continue to see these come down the pike, we'll be analyzing them both at the district level as well at the regional and at the statewide level through the Regional Water Authority and the Association for California Water Agencies, ACWA.
Great. We have enough time for 2 more questions. So Suzanne, and then we can take 1 more.
I would like to put in addition to that, as you legislate to those in power above us, legislate, I realize is probably not the proper term there, but also the group that has not been mentioned there so far is the group of elderly and physically challenged who have some difficulty sometimes with managing landscape, never mind tearing it out and putting something else in, or establishing a more water efficient landscaping. You talked about economic assistance, but I think that we need to look at also addressing the needs of those who may have physical needs as well as economic needs. It is easy to get distracted from and look at things from where we're all sitting currently, and we don't want to dig ourselves into a hole.
Sure. We have a couple resources available through Rex's program currently. One in particular is we offer home water audits, and that's there's no cost to the customer for that. and those are available through the Water Efficiency Program through Rex Muir. I believe there's information, yes, on our website, and we also have water efficient landscape classes, 5 this year. We have another one coming up in September the 27th right here. So we do offer several resources through our water efficiency program, and we'll continue to evaluate that program and determine how we can continue to expand the program or evolve it to meet our evolving needs of our customers.
Suzanne, were you also suggesting, though, that where advocacy can happen, advocate for people that have not only just economic needs, but physical needs?
Absolutely, because I know that there are, information is fine, but it only takes you so far. If you are physically unable to go further. Now, the other side is that many of the water efficient measures are also helpful if you are physically challenged, and that, of course, is a nice bonus.
Great, thank you. One more question? Great, Patty?
I would like an explanation of the service fee of my water bill. I get my water bill every other month. My usage is about $15 a month. The service fee is 5 times that amount. And I would like to know, and it seems to be going up fairly quickly. So what exactly does the service fee on the water bill cover?
Okay, we have our Administrative Services Manager, Susan Sohal, here. I'll just open and then I'll turn it over to her. The fixed portion, that is the fixed portion of your bill, and those cover costs of providing water regardless of volumetric usage. So regardless of how much water you use, we still have to operate and maintain, repair, and replace the system. And so a lot of those costs are rolled up into those service costs. It's just not viable to run a district based upon volumetric and exclusively. And so that's why you're seeing more water agencies shifting to a larger portion of their cost structure is included in the fixed portion of the bill. Do you want to add anything, Susan?
Sure, that's correct. Our portion of the bill is about 70% fixed and 30% variable. And most of that fixed charges is basically what it takes to run the district, regardless of if there's water flowing or not, if we're in a drought or whatever's going on. What is the actual cost of the water to open up the doors and make sure that we can keep everything going? And the variable portion is kind of, what does it take to get that portion of the water to you, like the purchased water that we get from San Juan as an example, or the groundwater wells.
And the wholesale water that we purchase has those kinds of components to them as well.
Did that answer the question? And I'm guessing there's information on the website too with regard to that. Would there be? Great. All right, well, thank you. If you have other questions, please, at the end of tonight, if you would come let me know, and we'll be sure to get those answered in the summary of tonight's meeting. And we are going to keep going with our next topic. Turn it over to Missy.
All right, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is to go over the asset inventory results. So I'd like to give you a summary on how we fared with this portion of the project. So as you know, I think the last time I talked to you about what we were doing with the asset inventory, the district has a digital map that contains, key information about our water system. It shows the location of our water mains, the sizes of our water mains, and the pipe type, along with the various other items. So originally, when this digital map was created, there was a lot of time spent entering data into the map. However, there was a lot of data that was not inputted. So as part of this project, we needed to spend some time to populate all of the blank data sets pertaining to particularly the age of the pipe and the pipe type in order to complete our water main assessment. So the next step of this study is to do a water main assessment. So we really needed this data inputted into our digital map. So just kind of a summary. I already stated this last time, but what we did do is we did go through our project files and found, the paper maps and any other documents that called out the pipe size and pipe type. And those documents were scanned, and then the data was inputted into the map. And then we also currently we're spending time doing quality assurance, quality control. Over the last several weeks, we've been doing that to verify the data and to make any corrections as necessary. So this map is really key into the next step. So we're really trying to be very detailed at this process. So here's some of our results. This is before our pipeline inventory process started. So this is the map of our pipeline asset inventory, and this is related to decade of installation. So the various colors represent the decade in which the water main was installed. So you can see the legend over there. There's various colors. Orange represents 1950. That's when those water mains were installed. Red is 1960. Green is 1970, and so on and so forth. And then at the bottom, you have a black line type. And that's pipelines that we didn't know what year those were installed. So those are unknown. So you can see a bunch of black throughout the map. And so we have 250 miles of pipeline, and 145 miles we did not have information inputted into our digital map, about 58%. So that was kind of before the inventory process. Whoops. All right, so here is after our inventory process. So much of the unknown, or the black, as you can see, is gone, and we have these beautiful colors. So as far as the black, the unknown, we are down to about 14 miles or 5% that are unknown. And I think as of today, we're probably closer to 1%. We spent the last week doing some more QA, QC, and are down to about 1%. So we have a really good basis of when our water mains were installed. So I'd like to point out this map is actually also in the back of the room. So during the break or afterwards, if you'd like to take a look at it, feel free. It's back there. And here is just another graphic showing that same information. As you can see, the majority of our water mains were installed between the 1960s and the 1980s. And that was due to urbanization, development within the district. And then if you like numbers, just another way to look at things, 1970s through the 1980s, 56% of our water mains were installed during those 2 decades. And we also have some older pipelines from the 1950s and 1960s that are still in use today as well. All right, the next pipeline inventory that was completed was dealing with pipe type. So this was before the inventory process, and on the right in the legend we have the different pipe types. I know they're all abbreviations. I'll go through those just so you can understand what ACP is and PVC. But the majority of our pipelines is ACP pipe, which is asbestos cement pipe. Now that was a very common pipe that was used up until about the 1980s, and then after that, PVC, which is polyvinyl chloride pipe, and DIP, which is ductile iron pipe, is now more commonly used. And then we have these other different pipe types, CML, STL, CMLC, DW. Those are all different types of steel pipe. So basically we have 4 main pipe types. So unknown pipe types was about 57 miles or 23%, not as much as the decade of installation, but still, a significant amount. So after we did our inventory, here's what you have. As you can see, there's a lot of green. So the green is the ACP pipe, which is the asbestos cement pipe. And we're down to about 2 miles or 1% that we don't know currently what it is. We're still going through that QA/QC process, so we'll be able to narrow that down. But really, we have a good basis to move forward with now. We have a good map to use in our next steps of our water main assessment. So just a graphical representation of that same information. To the left is ACP pipe. We have, over 140 miles of that. And then PVC is to the right, and then ductile iron pipe. And then the rest of our pipe type is that steel. So by the numbers, we have 154 miles of AC pipe, and then it's drastically reduced to PVC, 59 miles, ductile iron, 18 miles, and then the rest are, steel pipe, which is about 20 miles, a little bit less than 20. We have a total of about 250 miles of pipeline in the ground. So what are we going to do with this data? How are we going to use it moving forward? So this age and pipe data type will be used when we prioritize water main replacement in the water main assessment risk analysis step. So, generally we're going to be replacing older mains first. So we'll prioritize those mains. Those will be the first ones we replace. So that's important to know that information. And then if we're comparing two different pipes that were maybe put in the same year, we may look at the different pipe types. That might be a factor in determining which pipe is replaced first. Is AC pipe better than ductile iron pipe? We'll look at those two different pipe types as an example, and then determine which one we should replace first. So that's how this data is going to be used moving forward. So with that, that's the results of the asset inventory, and if anyone has questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Is the asbestos pipe any more expensive to remove because of the fact it has asbestos?
Well,
during the replacement?
Generally, when we do pipeline replacement, we don't remove the pipe that's in the ground. It stays in the ground. So in that sense, no, it's not more expensive. It just stays in the ground. Usually you put a pipe in a different trench. Now, with that said, you can only do that so many times. The roadways and the area is going to get congested. But at this point, no, it's not going to be more expensive.
So my question has to do with the coordination of the replacement plans, and whether or not the coordination is going to be with neighboring utilities like the sanitary district or the city's pavement maintenance program, so that you can make the most use of that, excavating or trenching at one time.
That's a good question. So, we're faced with that right now, and so we do work closely with specifically the city of Citrus Heights, because the majority of our service area is within the city, and we do meet with them twice a month, not necessarily dealing specifically with that, but we do know where they're doing work, and so we do try to coordinate our water main replacements with their projects. So if we know they're going to be repaving a road, and they have a schedule, what roads they're going to be replacing, then we look at our capital improvement plan, and we may have to adjust, which pipelines need to be replaced based on their, work as well, work program. And then as far as the other agencies, we do our best trying to coordinate with them. There are a lot of factors involved, but we do try to work closely with them.
Missy?
Time for one more question.
Missy, could you, for my edification and hopefully some other folks, could you explain what asset inventory project polygon means? I've not been able to figure that out.
Yeah, it's probably not too exciting for you guys, but for us geeks.
It sure's had me confused the last 3 or 4 days. I just cannot figure it out, and I've asked some pretty bright people to.
Yeah. It was a
Up with some
term we
answers, and
kind of
I
came
just-
up with. It's a term
that?
we came up with, and I don't know if it's necessarily important for the CAC members, but for our map that we have, the way we figured out which pipes or what is we went through our maps, we scanned all those documents, and then we created just lines in our map, which is a polygon, a rectangle, you know, where that project was on our map. So after we created all those polygons, then we used that information to populate those blank data sets. So it's really probably a little too detailed for the CAC, but we did put that information, I think, in some of the verbiage.
So just to clarify
Are you going to
then,
use those polygons that you've come up with when we start, or when you start replacing the water mains? The polygons that you've come up with, are they correlated to how you're going to go about replacing the water mains? For instance, in my neighborhood, let's say there's a polygon that involves the ACP pipe, okay? So is that part of the process of what you were doing, is saying, okay, this is one of the polygons that we're going to use when we replace pipes? Does that make sense?
Well,
or
really-
was this just your way of trying to find the pipes?
Well, the polygon is really just a representation of a project, the footprint of the project,
Of
the
the whole
project
project
limits.
as a whole?
So when there was a project that occurred, say it was a whole subdivision, we just created a polygon on our map, and this was the footprint of that project.
Okay,
So
now-
when we look at our map, we can see, oh, that was one project. That's all that means.
so just to clarify then, one could think of a polygon as a shape on a map that represents a specific project, a specific pipe that is currently in place, and there's specific information related to that pipe, that project. That specific information would help us understand when that project took place and what specific piece of pipe was put down into the ground at that time.
Great, thank you.
And again, if you have any other questions with regard to the pipes and the asset inventory, please, if you would get those to me at the end of tonight, I'll make sure that they get in the summary and we get them answered for you. So thank you. So we're going to keep moving on to our next building block, and I think Roger Cohn is going to address that. Thanks.
Thank you. It's on? I'll keep talking. Yep, it is. Okay. Okay, so we're almost there. 2 topics down, 1 technical topic to go, and it's one that is, I'd say, kind of near and dear to my heart here, just because I think, you know, it represents, you know, benchmarking is really a form of goal setting, and it's going to be real important. There we go. It's going to be real important here to come up with benchmarks here that we then can track over time and see what sort of progress we're making, and then make informed decision-making adjustments along the way. For those of you that remember the old Schoolhouse Rock Knowledge is Power cartoon and Saturday morning, so this sort of falls along the same line. But it's really sort of data is power, and it's the information that we gather from the whole benchmarking process that I think is really going to make this this project exciting. So wanted to start off a little bit just talking about water main basics. And I think we touched on this a little bit in the last meeting, and so I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but you know, the question on cost, very, very legitimate cost or question as far as, you know, what drives the costs and expenses here for the district, and why does main replacement cost so dang much here? And so these are just some example pictures of, and these are relatively small, these are probably more, you know, neighborhood lateral or main in residential streets here. But then when we start talking about larger ones and pipes, we start talking about very big projects. But main replacement work is expensive, and it's why we want to come up with an organized, methodical approach so that we are efficient in how we go about prioritizing it, sort of as Missy mentioned here. We can't do it all at once, so we have to prioritize and take care of the most important ones first. So again, a day in a life. And these really represent kind of, day in, day out activities here from both the operations folks, folks out of David's group here that are constantly out in the field, monitoring water quality, ensuring that water quality is actually delivered to all the homes. And I won't read through all of these, and this is a very partial, small list here. I mean, the list of activities that the operations group takes care of is long, and they're long days, and there's just lots that the operations side is taking care of. And likewise, on the engineering side, you've got the capital planning, and a lot of the planning work and the engineering work that goes up front, and that's going on a constant basis here. So that is just a recurring activity, a recurring cost, then that is part of the overall planning and engineering effort here for main replacement. And then we start talking about construction. And again, I think we touched on this here briefly, but I thought it was important to just talk about this again. But I think it's important to realize and to remind ourselves that a huge portion of the overall main replacement cost is actually in labor. It's not in the material. So the decision to replace an AC pipe, asbestos cement pipe, with either ductile or PVC, it's an important engineering decision, and it's one that the district goes through very methodically. But it is a modest component of the overall cost. So the blue color represents. And this is pretty typical here. So I mean, these are sort of generalized numbers, but blue representing the labor costs, and so that goes from the excavation work, the installation, and all the connections. So when you lay a water main down the street, you're not done. You have to actually connect each home up to the new main, and that's a very time-consuming, and it's a lot of work. Testing, and then the pavement restoration. And Richard, to your point here too, the more we can coordinate that work, then the better off, and the district does do a very good job here in terms of coordinating with the city and with the county here to take care of that. And then of course the materials themselves, as represented in the green, typically represent about a third of the cost, and that would be not only the pipe but also the backfill, because after you lay the pipe in the ground, you have to put in engineered material. You don't put in the original dirt, you put in better stuff to protect the pipe, and then of course the asphalt on top of that. And then the orange represents additional costs, be it traffic control or environmental, and of course we know environmental requirements for air quality monitoring and stormwater runoff and all that. That just adds to the effort. So So with that, I just wanted to now shift into kind of the majority of the talk, and that is on benchmarking. And so the classic definition here, or at least a definition out of my dictionary, was a standard by which something can be measured and judged. And so it's really kind of coming up with a way to measure how we're doing today and what progress we're making into the future. And so what that entails then, we've got tracking performance indicators. And I'll talk a little bit more about performance indicators, but benchmarks we can think of as sort of an action-oriented target. And again, we'll talk about that. Performance indicator is really kind of the response. How are we doing, and what sort of improvements are we seeing that are maybe not necessarily within our immediate control. And then finally, showing whether the benchmark goals that we establish at the beginning of the project, whether we're actually making progress towards doing those. And so why do utilities do this? Again, mainly for this project here, it's to help prioritize in the main replacement. We can't do it all at once. We have to prioritize. And as Missy said, whether it's taking care of the older pipes, whether it's taking care of pipes that maybe have greater leak histories or maybe just have a greater risk of failure, we have to come up with a way of prioritizing it. And it's also improving operational efficiency. And what I mean by that really is, that's sort of a day-to-day activity. It's a day-to-day operating cost of, if we can reduce leaks and reduce, field responses and main breaks, that's reducing the operation, that's improving operational efficiency for the system. And then, but certainly also optimizing capital improvements. So if we can better coordinate and plan the work that's ahead, then that's affecting future capital costs, and that's also an important benchmark that we want to take care of. And then finally, it's making informed decisions. And as I mentioned before, the power of data is there to validate or refute assumptions that we may have had. We may have thought we're doing a great job, and then we collect more data and find, wow, we really can do better. And on the other hand, we may think, well, boy, maybe we could be doing better, and we compare ourselves with other utilities, and we realize we're doing pretty good. And you'll see some information on that here. So the benchmarking steps here, pretty simple. First is just identifying what a goal is. And so a goal, an example of that might be, we want to reduce breaks and leaks in the system, just a fairly generic goal. Then would be to come up with a benchmark, to actually give a numerical number to that, to say, okay, well, what is the target that we want to set for that? And then collecting data. And not only does it need to be measurable, it needs to be something that we can actually track and record, but it needs to be recorded. It's not enough to go out and fix something and then nobody else finds out about it. It's like the proverbial tree falling in the forest. If nobody's there to hear it, does it make a sound or not? In the same way, we need to be collecting data, and that is part of the project here that we will be working on, is a data collection plan that helps us continue to evaluate how we're doing on benchmarks. How am I doing time-wise here? So this is an example. This is a hypothetical example, not directly from Citrus Heights Water District's data here, but an example of where benchmark and performance indicators can be a function of investments. And that's really, again, sort of at the heart of what we're going to be doing here, is coming up with a prioritization plan, which will then become an investment plan for how we go about, funding the improvements. But if you look on the left, you see basically a trend, again, a hypothetical trend for, in this case, I use the example of main breaks. And so that's showing, it may vary from year to year, but then starting at, kind of the dashed vertical line here, there are a couple of paths that can likely take. And what a lot of utilities are seeing, that as infrastructure ages, water main breaks and leaks, if you make zero investment or minimal investment, you're just going to see that rate, typically you're going to see that rate of incidents go up. And so then the next line there would be, for current investment, would be, well, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And again, you're going to probably see some improvement, but it's still probably likely going to trend. And again, that's what many utilities are seeing across the country. Then you might have a higher level of investment, and with the green line on the far right, that shows sort of an increasing level of investment, where if we want to sustain the performance that we have, what would it take? And so that might be, that would be to, basically flatline that there. And then the fourth would be, again, what I'll call a benchmark investment. So let's say we want to actually reduce the trend and turn the trend around and reduce the number of, in this, again, hypothetical example, main breaks. Well, so we would set a benchmark, and then we would track and see how we're doing over time. And one of the great things about this methodology here is that it gives us the flexibility to adjust capital spending and associated rate changes in the future here, so that if we do see and we're tracking performance, and in this particular case, this performance indicator, and we reach our benchmark, we actually have the opportunity at that point to say, we can adjust our spending, we can do something different. We have the information to at least make an informed decision in doing that. And so again, by going through the benchmarking process, then it just gives us the flexibility to adjust our plans going into the future. So what are some common utility water benchmarks? And there's a whole list of them, and the AWWA, the American Water Works Association, is a big advocate for utility benchmarking. They have a pretty thick volume of benchmarks that, and they cover across the board. There's operational, there's financial, there's all sorts of things. But really the focus here for this project is on the operational. And so the ones that I think we're really going to focus on here are these three. One is going to be the pace of main replacement, the first line there. And that would be measured in terms of what percent of water mains are we going to try and replace in a given year. And so theoretically, if you think that, if you replace 1% of your mains a year, then at the end of 100 years, you will have replaced all the water mains, and almost like painting the Golden Gate Bridge, you get to go back to the beginning and start all over again. Water loss is certainly another one, and that is also measured as a percent. That's something that Rex and the district are already doing here as part of the recent regulations here, is to track water loss. And that one would, again, fall a little bit more under more of a response in terms of how is the system responding to main replacements that the district is doing. And so, and on the far right, I've called that an indicator of integrity of the system here. How in what health, is the system in good shape? And again, we'll show some numbers here in a little bit.
What is the GPD? What does that stand for?
Excuse me, yeah, so water loss, so a couple ways to express that. One would be in terms of just percent. What percent of the water that the district buys or produces from its own groundwater or from San Juan Water District, what percent of that water actually gets to all of you? And so the difference between, what the main production numbers are versus adding up everybody's meters, that would be, the difference there would represent one way to calculate loss. The GPD per connection is another way, and that's simply looking at everybody's, the annual average water use numbers that we were presenting earlier, both today and in the future. And then, so that's gallons per day, and then dividing that by the total number of service connections. Again, just another way of coming up with a benchmark for that. And then breaks and leaks, the common measure for that is, number of events, number of water main breaks or found leaks in the ground per 100 miles of main. And again, that would be somewhat of a system integrity number, and but that is something that can be tracked. So these are actual. Let me just check to see. These are actual numbers, the orange lines that is here, from the district in terms of their main replacement over the last 5 years. And so you can see the orange, the solid orange line is the actual, and those are percentages. So on the vertical axis is percent. And so you can see, and then the solid dashed line, the dashed orange line is basically the composite average over that 5 year. And so you can see that they have been over the last 5 years below 0.5%, so less than 1%. And that's in reference to the green line, which represents a 1% target. I'm calling it a target because we haven't established yet what that actual benchmark goal is going to be. And then the blue line of 1.5% target. So again, this is one way to kind of look at where the district is today, and then we can chart and see where do we want to go into the future. But of course, that's going to have rate implications, and that because the more mains you try and replace, the faster the pace at which you do that, the more it's going to cost. And so and we have to work that into the calculation for that. Now, another benchmark, what we were just talking about, is water loss. And this is actually, the district is actually doing quite well in this regard. There are two numbers or two benchmarks that are commonly used for that. Again, one is the real losses per service connection. I won't explain real versus apparent, but let's just say real losses is actual water that is going into the ground or not getting to its intended customer. And again, that's the same gallons per day per connection. And the AWWA median number for that is almost 36 gallons per day per connection that is lost. And by comparison, the district, through its own water audit here, is under 25. So actually, and in fact, that puts them better than the 75th percentile. So from this regard, from this benchmark, the district is actually doing quite well. Likewise, on a leakage index, and again, I won't explain what that is, but it's a calculated number that AWWA has come up with. And you can see the range, you know, the 75th to 25th percentile is 1.5 to 2.5% as an index, and the district is at 1.2. That's good. That a lower number is better. That means, you know, a lower leak index. So, still a meaningful index, a meaningful benchmark from our standpoint. But the next steps for this project will be one, you know, the finalizing the main replacement goal here, whether it's at 1%, whether it's 1.5%, that decision doesn't come easily or lightly. I mean, obviously we have to get on top of it and we have to have a plan, but again, it has significant rate impacts and implications that will get factored into the analysis. And so we need to be very judicious here as we are coming up with what we think is a goal and a good benchmark goal to start with. The next would be to review in more detail some of the district's historical main break and leak data. And that, again, is going to be used as an indicator to help us prioritize which water lines and mains that we want to tackle first. Age is, as Missy mentioned, age is certainly a factor. But certainly those that maybe are more prone to leakage or that there's more historical leakage that's been observed and repairs made would help in that prioritization. And then the third bullet, conduct the main replacement prioritization and rate analysis, just as Missy indicated. And what the prioritization is really kind of what we will be coming back at the third workshop. And so that's going to basically sort of present kind of an overall ranking here of how we go about doing that. The rate analysis portion is what will come after that. And right now we're planning on at our fourth workshop where we will take the prioritization and then look at what those rate impacts are. And again, I come back to, and I believe that's the last slide for questions, but just to kind of leave you with the idea, you know, the whole purpose of going through this is to help the district and make its customers and that includes yourselves, make informed decisions on how we go about with the prioritization process. So with that.
Great. Thank you, Roger. We have, since we don't have any public here, we have 5 to 10 minutes for questions. So with regard to the benchmarking, so any questions that you have? Yes.
By David.
Can you go back a couple slides? Is that loss, is that per household or per main? What is that number again?
Yeah, so it's in the same way that per capita water loss is, per capita water use is calculated, where you take the entire service area, that includes residents, that includes businesses, that includes everybody, and then you divide it by the population. This essentially does the same thing. It takes the overall difference in water that is known to be essentially produced or purchased by the district versus that which is metered to all of the customers and takes that difference and divides it by all of the service connections.
So you spread it across the service area.
That's correct.
So I mean, that's a lot. I mean, because if you're talking about how we talked earlier about a threshold of 55 gallons per day per household, that's almost half of it, right? I mean, that loss would represent almost half of it.
Well, you go from the 66 gallons per day per person. Sorry, 66 gallons per day per person, less than 24.4. So you're realizing 24.4 loss out of 66 gallons?
Well, so, and Eric just pointed out that, so the 24, that essentially represents per household.
Thank
So
you.
you'd have to then divide that by, let's say, I don't know what the average would be, 4.
I
But if you
thought I
took
heard
that-
you say per person, so I appreciate
I
that.
apologize, yeah.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so I guess a simple way to perhaps look at that might be is that might be 5 or 6 gallons per person per day that is lost type of a thing. And again, I mean, I won't belabor the point here. Leaky pipes is a universal problem throughout the United States and throughout the world. And I would imagine there are some countries where they're lucky if 10% of the water actually gets to where it's supposed to go. But when you compare the survey results from utilities across the country, actually the district is from these numbers is doing actually quite well. So, and that's not to say that we aren't targeting making improvements, and that's part of the main replacement is to, if we can take out the pipes that are leaking more or make that as part of the prioritization, then we would expect that number to come down. So, Richard, yeah.
Is it reasonable to expect that as you move through the next steps in this process, that you may come up with multiple levels of benchmarks that you have to apply depending on various factors like the age of the pipes or the type of material, things like that?
Yes, I do think that's reasonable. I think the way I would perhaps look at it would be that we may make adjustments to the benchmarks over time. So that let's say today we decide that 24.4 is we're perfectly happy just right where we are and we do nothing else. And then 5 years from now, we look and we see from the latest AWWA survey that, look, the rest of the utilities that participate in the survey, they've now brought their numbers way down. Let's say now we are worse than them. That gives us an opportunity then to say, maybe we should revisit that benchmark. So I see it as perhaps more of a time-dependent thing. You know, when the district does a main replacement with, you know, the newest materials and a brand new line goes in, those lines get tested. They meet certain engineering and construction criteria. And so I think there's generally an assumption that whether you put in material X or material Y, that it's going to have a pretty high level of integrity, both initially and then over time. So again, I would come back to the maybe as an aggregate for the entire system, that it would be maybe more of a time adjustment that we may make some adjustments in benchmarking.
Other questions?
Yeah, David.
Yeah, my question is on the benchmarking. You're talking about putting in new mains and checking them. What are the intervals that you're going to start checking those benchmarks to make sure it's actually going in the way you want it to go? I mean, you're going to run a bunch of them and go, hey, let's check it out now? Or how do you know that you're going in the right direction that you want to go to? And when will you be doing those intervals?
No, that's a great question. And so for those, I think you all heard that, but how frequently are we going to be checking the benchmarking? And, you know, the good news is a lot of this information is actually, so I would say, accumulated real time. So, you know, main breaks and leaks, I mean, you can look at that over any given period of time. And then assess, gee, you know, are we going in the right direction or not? I guess I would view it as perhaps sort of an annual basis sort of thing, but it's data that is going to be continually collected by the district and then reevaluate. Likewise on the water loss, correct me if I'm wrong, Rex, but I believe that's an annual audit or an annual submittal on that, is it not? Or okay.
Correct. We're filling it out tomorrow, by the way.
There we go. So every year, just because the regulations require it, we will be going through, the district will be going through that process, and then they will be seeing on an annual basis, are we making progress or are we not? And I would imagine, you know, progress is not necessarily going to be linear. I mean, you may see wow, for some reason, we see an uptick or so. But it's kind of over the long haul, let's say over a 5-year period, that, if we see a trend in the right direction, then I think it's reasonable to assume that the actions that the district is taking are having a positive impact. And likewise, if the trend is negative, then we have to start reevaluating the process by which we prioritize mains.
So we have time for one more question.
Yeah, Wes?
Yes.
This is probably a silly question, but it'll be more complicated. I've been assuming that all of the pipe is going to be replaced by PVC, typically. Is that the preferred material, or do you really do calculations to decide whether it's ductile iron or PVC or what?
It is pretty common. PVC is a common pipe type that we are using for smaller diameter pipe, but the larger diameter pipe, we might go with a different material. And we generally don't have a large diameter PVC pipe. You might have, something like a ductile iron or steel.
That was quick. We could probably do one more. Anyone else? Great.
Yeah, Rich.
This is more of a clarification with your number, the 24.4 that you're saying there. If I'm understanding what you're saying, that 140 gallons per person per day, and you're saying there's on average 4 persons per household. So you're saying that's approximately 560 gallons of water. So the 24.4 represents just about 5% loss of water. Is that what that would be?
That's absolutely right. And in fact, I think as part of the audit, there's a separate or a different calculation. And the reason why I didn't produce that calculation in this is that there are actually different ways to calculate water loss on a percent basis. And so rather than try and compare apples to oranges, but I think the actual reported number, if I'm not mistaken, is 6.5%. Which is also compares very well industry-wide. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Rich.
Okay, well, thank you, Roger. And we are moving into wrapping up tonight. And so wanted to just turn this over to Jenna for public comment.
Sure. This is an opportunity if there's any members of the public here tonight to make a comment. Anyone here? Hearing none, that closes public comment.
Thank you. So let's look at next steps. And we'll just do a quick recap on what we've done tonight, because these are such significant building blocks for the project that you have embarked upon. So tonight we first looked at the water demand forecast, and you'll all remember that that means future water use, or these are the results of those, correct? That future water use is projected to decline. And district pipeline asset inventory, looking at all the pipes and where they're located and what type they are. For example, that water main age and pipe type will be 2 key components in prioritizing the main replacement program that you are in the middle of participating within. And then Roger's main replacement basics and benchmarking, that these will be the benchmarks as they're developed that you'll use to track your progress toward the goals. Let's look at next time, and you can look at the back of your I don't think I'm supposed to call it a placemat, but we all call it the placemat, so I'll call it the placemat. And so that will be on December the 11th. And so then we'll be looking at the main replacement findings and costs, the funding concepts, sort of the introduction to these funding concepts, and looking at various options for main replacement, and identifying selecting the 5 top options. So some documents that you'll be receiving, and again, as you did with this meeting, if you would be sure to read those over, make some notes, identify any questions that you have. And I believe you can always feel free to call the district ahead of time too if you have any of those, or bring them to this meeting. So the main replacement and cost and the infrastructure challenges. So those will be some documents that you'll be receiving. So that's what we'll be doing next time, again on December the 11th. It's hard to believe, but that'll probably be here just like that. So our last topic is a link to the website for some information that you'll want to be able to access, and Chris is going to cover that.
Thank you. Just wanted to provide everybody with a brief little presentation on what we have on the district's website. So if you go to chwd.org/customer advisory committee, as I'm about to do right now, you should be able to locate a number of the different documents that we're discussing. In addition, you would be able to, of course, locate video that is currently located on our YouTube channel, and it's loading up right now, as you can see. So if you go to the website, you're going to find, one, information with regards to meetings, our Customer Advisory Committee member directory, and folks out there watching this on YouTube or out there in our audience this evening would be able to sign up for email notifications. So if I click down here on meetings, it'll take me down to information on the current meeting that's happening this evening, as well as some information with regards to previous meetings and our document library. Finally, of course, we do have our meeting recordings. These videos are located on our YouTube channel. Folks, we would request if you have the chance to view the videos coming out of these meetings. Folks on YouTube are likely viewing them right now, listening to me talk about this. And if you have the chance, please, of course, like our page or the videos. We'd greatly appreciate it.
And you want the friends and family to like it too, right?
Oh, most definitely.
Absolutely. Okay. And Rex, you also had something that you wanted to, a next step that you wanted to highlight.
Thank you. Yes, it's a selfless plug for our next class that we're holding here at the community center. It will be September 27th. It will be a fall kind of a pruning class along with the Sacramento Tree Foundation and some tips on how to prepare for the summer months and get your garden ready for the spring. So it is free, and we urge you to go to the website for more information. And there's several flyers in the back if you'd like to take one. It's got the class description. And we are giving away free Froggy moisture meters to all the folks that show up at our class. So look into it, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rex. So as we have done in the past, we just want to always continue to improve these meetings, and we'd just like to get a sense from you as to what you're taking away, or if you've thought of one other question that you'd like me to add to the list, please let us know what you're taking away, but also if you have another question, I'll add it, and we'll make sure to get answers onto the summary. So let's start with Ray, and we'll go around, and that way, Jenna, you'll be able to wrap us up. And be sure to talk into the mic.
My only concern tonight, again, the staff did a wonderful job. I appreciate what they do every week and month and all the meetings. Come to a regular meeting and you'll see them in action again. I'd really like to see the projector work better because my eyes are bad enough and I'm feeling like I can't see a darn thing. So that's the only issue I have, and that's not related to the program. It's just related to the projection. Also, I will give a shameless plug for anyone who is bored tomorrow night between 6:30 and 8:30. I will be moderating the chamber or the city council debate in the city hall, 6:30 to 8. We have 2 hours. It'll also be on cable channel 14 if you're really, really bored and need to watch it twice. It's about 10 to 15 questions to our 5 city council candidates, and it should be a lot of fun.
Great, thank you. Noe?
Just had a quick question to the Citrus Heights Water District. Is there any financial gain to selling water to other water purveyors that are nearby? And if so, will that be considered into the sizing of your piping?
The answer to your first question is yes. However, we can't budget for those water transfers, and so we can't also factor that into our financial planning because we don't know from one year to the next whether or not the conditions are going to allow for us to be able to work as a region to transfer water, excess water, that is to say, to outside the area. We actually were able to do that this year in partnership with many water agencies, and so those revenues that we'll realize are unbudgeted revenues. But unfortunately, because of the unpredictable nature of those events being able to take place, we can't factor that into our financial planning.
No particular questions, but certainly appreciated the information and the additional work on backgrounds to help those of us who are just users rather than knowledgeable people about water districts.
Ray, it was clear to me. I don't know about you. I could see it all.
More power to you.
I appreciate all the information you guys are passing on. I think this collaboration effort is a very good idea. It's nice to see the additional people from Harris to know that, Roger, you're not up 24 hours a day working on this by yourself. So thank you very much, guys.
I guess my one takeaway is the more I'm starting to learn, is the more it seems like I don't know. And I look forward to the next meeting.
Yeah, I'll have to go along with what David just said. I'm looking forward to really digging into the meat of this. I think we started tonight. Can't wait for next week, next meeting.
It was very impressive to me to see the amount of work that your water district staff have put into this event and this whole process. Speaking as a government employee, this looks like a very significant amount of work that went into tonight and all the other workshops, and I just commend you all for what you put together here. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for all the information and for laying the foundation to help us understand, as we go through the next steps.
I feel like I'm learning a lot, slowly but surely. I do have a question, though. Are there any other utilities that have recently been through this type of project that we could learn lessons from?
Yes, there are other utilities. I'd say a few in the Sacramento area, but throughout the state that have gone through or have implemented this. But most utilities, I would say, in my experience, are behind the curve and not as far along here in kind of going through this rigorous sort of asset management as well as public outreach process. So there are some we can definitely learn from. I think many more will learn from this group here when all is said and done.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the presentation. You guys do an outstanding job. I'm learning a lot, which is very hard for me to understand. I'm actually learning something. The two bills that were passed by the state, thank you for bringing them to our attention, because if you listen to the news, we're all going to jail already. So thank you for showing that there's no penalties at this time, and hopefully you guys keep fighting for us and see how this works out. Thank you.
I think it was a very informative meeting. I still have questions that Hillary and I spoke during the break that I believe are going to be answered in future meetings. I think they're serious questions. Hope that they are answered. I particularly want to thank Missy and Chris for explaining what I know what a polygon is, but the Asset Inventory Project Polygon, it has been driving me crazy for a week.
Next time you can just call.
I came close, Missy. I think I had the answer, and not quite, but I do appreciate that.
Well, and if you do have more questions you'd like me to get on the list that we could get answers into the summary, I can.
I don't think those, as Hillary and I talked, I think they're questions that will become apparent in the future, at future meetings. Thanks, Laura.
I would like to echo Catherine's comment about all the work that's going into this. I'm very impressed by the logic and the sequence that all of this is being done, both on the analytical side and then as it's revealed to us step by step. So it's very impressive.
I appreciate the, the welcoming our questions, and I've learned a lot from everybody's questions. So, I don't think there's no such thing as a stupid question. So I feel like I've been a sponge here tonight. But it's been great to hear everybody's questions and then have them answered so clearly and kind of just bringing it down to our level. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I just want to reiterate what was already been said. It's quite noticeable of the preparation and effort into bringing this briefing to us, and it's really appreciated. You can see the hard work in this just to get it to us and trying to help us understand it. And thank you very much.
So pretty much what everybody else said, and I mean the massive undertaking of taking those paper documents and transferring that to an actual graph, I mean, that's incredible. And it's really cool to look at. I'd like to know what kind of pipe I have on my street. Anyways, thank you.
And then, did you want to do your takeaway then, Chris? And then
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff and those in attendance for participating and for asking your very thoughtful questions. It's an important educational component, it seems, of the progression where we're kind of working through the story of getting educated and moving on to further decision making. So thank you for your thoughtfulness and your questions.
Just to reiterate Jenna's point, yes, many thanks very much for all the thoughtful questions. It's very helpful for us to continue to tell the story and know exactly what specific information you all need. Just one brief little point of note, if you could please be sure to leave your name tags. It'll assist us in cutting down on costs prior to your departure. Thank you so much.
This concludes our meeting, and I'll say that the meeting has adjourned on time at 9:15. Thank you.